Hello, this is Geometry Notes 1-5 Angle Relationships with Mrs. Mosley. Goal for today, identify and use special pairs of angles. Go ahead and do the warm-up and pause this video when you are done with the warm-up. Go ahead and unpause. Okay, so hopefully you have done this problem. What I would be looking at on a homework or an assessment is, did you use a straight edge to extend the rays? Now, what I did, I didn't use a straight edge. That would be bad. So you would need a straight edge, make those straight, and then measure with your protractor. You should get 45 degrees. So you can say measure of angle 1 is 45. If you got 46, 44, that's fine as well. You could also name that as measure of angle NPS, or you could label it as measure of angle SPN. But that's it. So one of those three would work, but you may not label it as measure of angle P because there's more than one angle at vertex P. Now, angle vocabulary in the modules in the Canvas for geometry, there is under chapter 1 a review, vocabulary, and some links for review. So you do need to know your words and formulas for chapter 1. Get started now in reviewing. Example 1, find x and find the measure of angle NPS. If the measure of angle NPS is 16x minus 4, it's required that you mark up your pictures. And the measure of RPS is 2x plus 13. Now, what we do know about these two angles is that they form a right angle because of this right angle mark right here. So we do not know that they are equal to each other, but we do know that they add to 90 degrees. So 16x minus 4 plus 2x plus 13 add to 90. We've used this before. Let's write it again. This is called the angle addition postulate. Angle addition postulate. A postulate is something that is true, but we cannot prove it. We do know that pieces of angles add to get the total degree. So let's go ahead and solve. We have 18x plus negative 4 plus 13 is plus 9 equals 90. Subtract 9 from both sides, so 18x is 81. Divide both sides by 18, and so x is 4.5. So 4.5. Now we want the measure of angle NPS. Measure of angle NPS is this 16x minus 4. So replace the x with 4.5. And just use your calculator is fine. You get your 72 minus 4, which is 68. So 68 degrees. Let's move on to the next problem. Example 1, find x if the measure of angle 2 is 16x minus 4 and the measure of angle 4 is 12x plus 16. These are called vertical angles. They are opposite angles. They're formed by two intersecting lines. So this angle and this angle are the same. This is called the vertical angle theorem. We will formally learn that in chapter 2. Right now, just trying to get to know some of these words. Vertical angle theorem. So we have 12x plus 16 equals 16x minus 4. At this point, chapter 1, you do not have to write out vertical angle theorem. I would encourage you to do that. It will be required in chapter 2 on. What is required in a problem like this is if you have vertical angles, you have to mark that they are congruent. So use tick marks, whether you use something like that or use a tick mark like that or a double tick mark. Whatever marks you use on one, you have to use the same marks for the other. Okay, let's solve for x. So subtract 12x from both sides. Add 4 to both sides. So we get 20 equals 4x. Divide both sides by 4 and we give 5 equals x. So that's one of our answers. The other is the measure of angle 2, and we know that the measure of angle 2 is 16x minus 4. Replace the x with 5, so 16 times 5 is, what is that? 80, so 80 minus 4 is 76, so 76 degrees. So for an angle, use degrees. If it's just x, you don't have to put any labels on it. Okay, second side. Number 3. This is maybe going to be tricky for some of you. You have to know your vocabulary. So I am introducing some vocabulary in this example. We've already talked about opposite rays. If TL and TS are opposite rays, that means that those two rays create a full line. I would use a color, let's say blue. Let's get out another color. We have TE, ray TE, and ray TR are opposite rays, so they form a line. And now we also know that TN is an angle bisector of angle LTE. So that means this angle and this angle have the same measure. Okay, we are not finding any measures in this problem, but what we are doing is working on vocabulary. So a new vocabulary word, adjacent angles. Adjacent angles are angles next to each other that share a side, meaning they share an ray. So a pair of adjacent would be like these two green angles, or this 110-degree angle with this angle. So adjacent just means that they do not have to have the same measure. They just have to be next to each other. So like angle 1 and 2 in this example I'm showing are adjacent. They are angles next to each other. They have the same vertex and they share a side. So let's just use the example of the green angles, angle LTN and angle NTE. There are a lot of correct pairs for part A, so not just one answer is correct here. Okay, vertical angles. We've talked about vertical angles before. If I have two lines that intersect, then we have opposite angles, or vertical angles are congruent. So these two are congruent and these two are congruent. So a pair of acute we've talked about before, is less than 90 degrees. So that would be, if you look at our picture of red line and blue line, red line and blue line, let me just show it off to the side. We have our red line and we have our blue line form a pair of acute vertical angles, and they form a pair of obtuse vertical angles. So the acute vertical angles, I'll do that in, let's do orange because that's what we've had, would be these two angles. The other angle pairs would be the obtuse angle pairs. So almost always vertical angles will, if you have two intersecting lines, you'll have two sets of vertical angles. One will be acute, one will be obtuse, unless your two lines are perpendicular, meaning they meet at right angles. Then all of your angle pairs are right angles. Okay, name the pair of acute vertical angles. That would be this angle and this angle. So angle LTE, or angle ETL, and angle RTS, or angle STR, but the T's have to be in the middle, meaning those are the vertices. Okay, name a pair of obtuse vertical angles. That was the other pair. So we have RTL, angle RTL, or LTR, and ETS, angle ETS, or angle STE. Name two supplementary adjacent angles. Supplementary are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. Complementary are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So supplementary, let me just help you with that word. Supplementary are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. One way to remember that is that this S looks like it could be like made into an 880 degrees. Supplementary. And complementary, I'll just use a different color. Complementary are two angles that add up to 90. So complementary. These are words you should have learned way back in middle school. So complementary, if you're looking at the CO, you could kind of look at it that it looks like 90 degrees. So supplementary. So name two supplementary adjacent angles. That would be two angles that are next to each other, that are adjacent to one another, and they form a straight angle. So you could also call them a straight angle pair. Now, my Word document's having some issues again. So yes, I'm having some computer issues. I love my school computer, a laptop, but it has some issues sometimes. So while I am waiting for this uh, to get up, could you guys answer D and E? So go ahead and do D and E because you have to wait for me anyways. Okay, so I cannot get there right now, so I will answer the question here in Smart Notebook. So we have two supplementary adjacent angles. One could be angle, there are a lot of different answers like NTE and angle NTR, but any angle pair that form a line. Now the best way to describe these two angles that would be adjacent and supplementary is you call them a linear pair. So we will be using that vocabulary word for supplementary and adjacent. So instead of saying, yes, they're supplementary, we know they added 180, and yes, they are adjacent, we would say they're a linear pair. Okay, and then so that was D, one correct answer. And an angle supplementary to angle RTS is angle RTL. Okay, so back to our Word document, I can now access it. So let's go ahead and go and do number 4. So mark up your picture. So they tell us that NR is perpendicular to line MQ, and we want to find X, Y, and MSN. So one of the first things we can do is we know that if this is right angle, all of these are right angles. So just finding Y, we know that 9Y plus 18 equals 90. Subtract 18 from both sides. So we get 72, divide both sides by 9. So I know Y is 8. We also know that these two pieces add to 90, so 5x plus x equals 90. Now note that I'm showing work. This is required in geometry. We are requiring you guys to show your algebra work to get your geometry credit. So we are reviewing. So 90 divided by 6 is 15. Lastly, we want to find the measure of MSN. So MSN, well, we know that's 90 degrees. So that was it for these notes. If you have any questions, send me an email, ask me questions, and have a great time working on your homework and practice.